Good evening. We call to order the regular meeting of West Valley City Council. We note that we have a quorum present. We have 6 of our 7 council members present. Councilwoman Karen Lang is excused tonight. We will begin our meeting by turning to Councilmember Jake Fitisemanu for our opening ceremony.
Thank you, Mayor. Friends and neighbors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. In observance of this day being Constitution Day, as well as Citizenship Day, I just wanted to take a minute and express on behalf of my colleagues here just a couple of words on citizenship and the importance of the Constitution. And as someone who wasn't born in this country, who had the privilege of watching my own father earn this citizenship, and it really was earning his United States citizenship. To this day, I remember, and I grew up in the American school system, but his knowledge, in fact, he memorized, the preamble and the Bill of Rights and all of the amendments, and his depth of knowledge and his dedication to learning about, not just learning about our new country, but really devoting himself to this nation with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities of citizenship is something that will always stick with me. And also seeing my own wife become a United States citizen just about 3 years ago, and many, many others in my family. This is something that I definitely don't take for granted, and I hope that I'm also instilling that into my own children and those around us, so that we don't take that for granted. This is a very special day in observance of the Constitution, our governing document, and those inspired or very powerful codes of law that came before that. And so I just wanted to mention that and also invite to offer an invocation this evening. Pastor Rob, a great friend of ours here from Trinity United Methodist Church, to open our meeting tonight with an invocation.
Thank you. First of all, God's evening to all of you on this Citizenship Day. It is an important. Would you please join me in whatever attitude of prayer makes you the most comfortable, the most inspired, or relaxed, whatever connects you to your God.
No problem, much better. Let's pray. God, here we are. Here they are, the City Council of West Valley City, Utah. Everyday people, charged by the people of Utah's second largest city to be extraordinary. I pray this evening that you will help them find their personal extraordinary, and to find it right there where you placed it inside them. We apologize ahead of time for sometimes recognizing our God-given extraordinary but not using it, because the ordinary or the just enough and even the party line are so much easier for us sometimes. And because they also let us avoid hearing those 6 dangerous words, we've never done it that way. God, please help these fine council members and those staff folks that serve this city to remember that West Valley City, the land and the people, are theirs to serve. And that the only way they can serve to the best of their ability, and the only way they can use all of that extraordinary that you've given them, is to never settle. Never take the easy way unless it is the right way. To never take the way we've always done it, unless that is the best way for the Westphalians. Be those Westphalians the 6th generation Midwestern pioneers or 1st generation Pacific Island pioneers, or any of the dozens and dozens of more pioneering groups that have come here to Utah throughout the years and have settled for a time here on the west side of the valley of the Great Salt Lake. And God, we are blessed by you that they are still coming to find a better life, a life where they too can live into their very own God-given extraordinary. In other words, to become Utahns, to become West Valleyans. Thank you for all the extraordinary folks in this room, God. And please join with me as I offer them. Shalom Aleichem. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Rob.
Next will be our minutes of September 10th. A motion on the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of September 10th.
Second. Any further comments on them? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes September 10th, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Passes unanimously. Minutes are approved. Next, we have our budget award for fiscal year 2017-2018. And, okay, if you'll come up and introduce yourself. Yeah, there he is.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Kim Coleman. Excuse me, and a cold has me recently. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at one of your neighboring entities, Granger Hunter Improvement District. And before the award, I would just like to thank you for the working relationship that we have. Tonight we were reviewing the 4100 South project in our board meeting, and we know that there's been a lot of work there, a lot of infrastructure and things to work around, a lot of frustrations and challenges, and we're grateful to you for the working relationship we have. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here tonight as a representative of the government finance officers of the U.S. and of Utah, and to present the Distinguished Budget Award to West Valley City. I've been here a few times, I think at least 2 or 3 in the recent past, because you guys just keep knocking the awards out of the ballpark. So I can't hardly keep up with Jim and his crew, but it is a significant accomplishment. It started back in 1984, this program, and it's to encourage you to have a kind of document that is not only representative of your policy, but your budget, and something that the people can understand and relate to and comprehend, and that's a challenge to put all that together in one document. And so it's a great thing that you guys have done. The budget is rewarded by a number of GFOA professional staff and also outside reviewers, so it really goes under a great deal of scrutiny after you pass it. And having worked for a city and a district, I know how much that budget process is all-consuming for a period of time. It takes a great deal of work from you and from your staff. So it's a heavy load, and I appreciate and respect what you've gone through. The award for the 2019 budget is the 28th consecutive time that you've received this award. There aren't a whole lot of entities in the country that have achieved that. So I hope that would be noted by those present in the press and anybody else who would hear about it. It requires a top-down effort and support at all levels. So congratulations on a job well done. I won't belabor you with a lot of details tonight, but I would like to especially give special recognition to Jim Welch, your finance director, to Jeanette Carpenter, your budget supervisor, and also to Abby Smott, the executive administrative assistant. So thank you and congratulations. I'll be happy to present this to whoever wants to receive it personally.
Mr. Coleman, thank you for coming. Appreciate your being here. Next on our agenda is the comment period, the public comment period. If you are here to speak to the enacting of a temporary land use restriction on our zoning Title VII, on multiple unit dwelling residential zone, we'll have a separate public hearing on that. If you are here to speak to the Resolution 19-116 regarding the city acquiring through various possible methods property at 2940 West, 3650 South, then I believe we'll allow those representing the owner there to speak at that time. They don't need to do it during the public comment period. With that then, we do have several people who are signed up. And I see some familiar names, but if you haven't spoken before, we hope you're aware, 5 minutes maximum, speak only or address only the mayor. It is your time to speak. It is not question and answer. It's not debate time. So just use that. With that, we'll start with Steve Lovell.
I would like to speak on the land.
Okay. We'll allow, yeah, you're representing the landowner? Okay. Yeah, we'll allow that. Then Alan Newman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this time. My name's Alan Nauman. I live right here in West Valley City, and I'm coming before you specifically for a yes vote on an ultimate vote you'll have to take, I believe, in the next coming weeks or months about going 100% renewable energy through Rocky Mountain Power, the new legislation passed this year, HB 411. And it's an opportunity to say 100% renewable energy go through Rocky Mountain Power, so even the unions will love it because it's Rocky Mountain Power. And so that's what I hope you'll say yes to. I know your staff's looking at it because I asked them, you guys can bring this forward, and they're doing some homework, so it will come before you. And I'm hoping that you'll all say yes once you get familiar with it. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. And I'm glad I hit tonight because it's a very unique story. If I wasn't here tonight, I wouldn't have heard. So I'm very glad I came tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mike Markham.
Okay, Mike Markham, she knows my address. Mayor, whoever else is listening, I want to keep pushing for our neighborhood preservation efforts. We need to stay on top of that. I hope in the budget there's been plenty of money allocated to that. I've got an issue with a house that is at 3001 West, 4100 South. It's zoned agriculture. It's the old Mackey property. My neighbor back here, Marlo Springer, who keeps telling me he's not related to Jerry Springer, but I don't believe him. He's called, I've called. It's a piece of agricultural property that is not being maintained whatsoever. Over the 24th, we had a fire. If it wouldn't have been for the fire department to get there right away, it could have done a lot of damage. People don't think when they light fireworks next to dead shrubs and unmaintained property. So if we could get somebody to take a good solid look at that. I've been told that they have been given a notice, and maybe they don't understand what the notice is. It's a rental property now. It was, like I say, it was owned by the Mackey family. When Rulon Mackey was taking care of it in his 80s, it was nice. Now we have 3 younger families living in it that doesn't understand nice. We've got big, tall, dead grass weeds right up next to my fence, our backyards. They mow part of what you can see from the city, but from the street, but there's big piles of debris, stuff from the fire. They've never bothered to, they finally bundled it, but they don't put it out on the curb. Yesterday would have been a big pickup day. So if we could just get our code enforcement people out there, keep up the good work, stay on top of some of these issues. I've sent a couple of neighborhood lists, and I haven't seen any changes whatsoever. I understand they're keying in on some of the bigger problems, which we have, but I'd like them to loop through my neighborhood. A lot of it is very obvious to them. They don't have to look very hard. But it's kind of my quest to keep a tidy neighborhood. I got people that tease me about my terminology, tidy, but it's like I've said before, good people don't move into bad neighborhoods. So if we, if we're striving for good people, we can't have bad neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else to speak in our public comment period? Yes, if you'll come, state your name and your address so that we can contact you afterwards if need be.
Yeah, my name's David Ormond. I live at 3582 South, 3200 West. I think he's right. People don't move into bad neighborhoods. But code enforcement, I had an issue with them a little while ago. I lived there for 5 years. I lived next to a vacant field owned by America First. I've never had grass in my front yard. I was cited by code enforcement for not having grass in my front yard. And right on the citation it said that I will maintain grass where grass once was. I called the code enforcement officer. I said, hey, I'm trying to rezone this property as commercial and put a storage facility in it. Putting grass in here in a drought is not feasible. It's not a good idea, and it's a waste of water, and it's a waste of time and money. And I said, and right here on your code, it says that I will maintain grass where it once was. My house was built in the 1930s. It's never had grass in the front yard. He said I'd have time to talk to the judge, whatever. So I went to the judge Tuesday. And I talked to him, I read the code. He said, maybe there wasn't grass in there during your lifetime or mine, but it's reasonable to assume that there was grass at one point, so the fine's gonna stand. Which is fine, that's great. The code enforcement officer told me that the fine would start after I went to court, because that was the day that I got to explain why I didn't feel like I needed to put grass in the front yard of the property that never had grass in it. That being said, my main concern on all of this is that the judge that fined me for not having grass in my front yard is Lane Morris. And Lane Morris is the director of code enforcement. Now, the 14th Amendment guarantees him the right to due process. And part of that due process is my case being heard by a judge that is impartial. And Lane Morris, being the department head of code enforcement and representing the city's interests in code enforcement, is unable to be impartial when he's adjudicating a code enforcement case. And I don't think that's right. I'm not sure how to handle it, but something needs to be done about that. And I agree that if people don't move into bad neighborhoods, I'm a good person. I wouldn't move into a bad neighborhood, but I also don't like feeling like my rights are just getting trampled on because we have somebody that manages the department. He sends people out to violate people over, and then is also the judge on the case brought by that department. I think that needs to be changed. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll close our public comment period, bring it back here. Mr. Pyle, any comments?
I think I'm good for tonight, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. City Council comments? Okay. I don't see anything there that we need to put on our agenda for next week specifically. Okay. Let's see. Next we go to our first public hearing, our only one on this one officially. This is regarding our enacting a temporary land use regulation for all ordinance text changes applicable to Title VII. That's the zoning ordinance, and all requests for the RM zone, which is multiple unit dwelling residential. We will include in that consideration of ordinance 19-38. What is happening is that we have been receiving a number of requests for zoning changes where they want to put up higher density housing. We've had several of those come forward, and we thought we needed to, and there are several more out there that we're aware of that may come forward. They haven't officially yet, although inquiries have been made along those lines. We wanted to, this would allow the council to step back and review our current policy to see if there are any system changes or ongoing changes we should make, or if our current policy is correct, and since we're receiving requests for exceptions or changes to that policy, this would allow that to occur. Now, in conjunction with this, the city has put out there two alternatives. Alternative number, was it 1 or A? 1? 1. Okay, alternative 1 is that if this goes into effect, we would have an alternative there that we could still change it during the moratorium on this, which is up to 6 months. But we would still make changes based upon what happened last night at the state legislature, some changes that were made that affect our city statutes, and that we would still be able to make those changes. The second alternative is that same thing, but including there that all items in Title VII would not be put in the moratorium, only those dealing with the RM zone. Did I say that correctly? Yeah. So everything else would not be included in the moratorium. So that is the introduction. Anyone want to add any other comments on that? Seeing none, then we will open a public hearing for this. Is there anyone here from the public to speak to this issue? Now this is on the moratorium. Okay, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Steve Lovell, and my address was noted. Its office is in Sandy. I'm legal counsel for a party that is under contract to purchase a property located at 2880 South, 5600 West. It's approximately 7.5 acres right across the street from the Highbury Parkway. You've got the Bonsai restaurant to the north and Five Guys to the south, and the new Mountain View corridor that's going into the west. And of course, it's on 600 West. This parcel is unique, and I don't know which category I would fall in under those options. I don't know them well enough to know which one would benefit my client's situation. But we've been under contract. We're working on this project for over 10 months now. The property is unique in that or rather over 80% of the property is already currently zoned RM. Just a strange, I don't know the history, but strangely there's a small chunk of the property right in the middle that is still zoned R110. The intent of the development would be to rezone the front that's within the overlay to be commercial C2 zoning and to put in a hotel. The challenge we're having is that what do you do with the rest of the 7 acres? And we've teamed up with a home developer that is interested in putting 64 townhome units into the back half of the property. And what we were anticipating through this process, and it's taken so long because there's been a number of challenges with the development, trying to figure out where that demarcation line is between commercial and RM, and soils, groundwater, you name it, has delayed it. Otherwise, we would have been submitted months ago. But needless to say, the plan was to rezone the portion of the R110 that comprises less than 20% of the property to RM, and rezone the front RM section to C2. The interesting thing about that is the net effect is that the overall RM portion of the property is reduced because we're rezoning more of it to commercial than is currently R110. So my request, I think I feel, I don't know what all the current applications are, I don't know what all the pending applications would look like, but I have to believe that this property is somewhat unique in that 80% of it is already RM, and everything around it is RM or C2. There's no portion of any neighboring property within a good distance that is anything other than RM or C2, and to keep it that zone, the current zoning just wouldn't make sense. This is the obvious use, the obvious rezone, the obvious development of the property. And so what I would request this council to consider is a carve out in maybe that option 2 that you're looking at, to perhaps narrow the scope of the moratorium to exclude any properties that currently have a certain threshold. Maybe 50% of the property is already zoned RM, exclude that out, since it would make more sense for that one to have an exception. So that would be my request for the council to consider, and I'm available afterwards if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to this issue? Seeing no one else with any comments, we'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the council for consideration of Ordinance 19-38.
Mayor, I'd like to make a couple comments. I appreciate your comments, sir. I forgot your name already. I'm not good at that. But appreciate your comments. Certainly, whenever any action like this is considered, it's going to catch people at all different stages of just thinking about it to, we have the application ready to submit tomorrow, and what have you done to us? It's important for us as a city to, as best as we can, have plans that are looking into the future, that make sense. And I think as a body, we, or most of us at least, thought we needed to catch our breath and take a look at this overall. Usually there's a various mix of zoning change requests that come forward, and everything now seems to be more focused on high-density housing. We want to make sure that we can provide services for that where it is. Now, if you have, we're not changing anybody's zoning, you can go ahead and build on the zoning that you have. I understand that this property you mentioned in the comment period is unique. I believe that all real estate is unique, and certainly would better support some uses than others. This moratorium will not necessarily be for 6 months. We do that because that's what the law allows us. It may, in fact, be that as we consider this and decide what to do, if anything, we may not change anything at all. It doesn't really end up delaying this property owner or any property owner, depending on the course that this takes. But we need a little time, I think, to catch our breath and take a look at the map and make sure that what happens here makes sense and is understandable. Because if we're just talking about building on this zone, everybody can go ahead and do that already. What we are seeing is just this case. We've assembled some property, we want to change the zoning on part of it, or this part doesn't match, and we just need to make sure that our plans make sense, that they're understandable, that people can rely on them in the future, and see that where such a use would be appropriate as deemed by the city. And that's pretty much the extent of my comments. I would make a motion to approve Ordinance 1938 enacting the moratorium. I would move that that be option 2, which limits it in scope only to these zones, but allows the city to bring forth changes to the ordinance that are necessary to comply with federal and state law.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
I would just say that given the temporary nature of this, and also the points noted by Councilman Bueller, in regards to I also am in favor of limiting that piece, and so the second option would also be my preference, and I would then second his motion.
Any further comments? Mr. Pyle, I just want to make sure we're doing this option 2, that's already been reviewed, and that's sufficient to have it all included in there?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct? Okay. I'm just thinking about the request. It is interesting, and even on the basis of this request that was made regarding that, there's no guarantee that that request would come in next week, next month, or somewhere in the future. Everything that is happening, of course, is unknown until it's finalized. But given the number of requests that we've started to receive, one of the options that will still be available to us is that we may opt to say, we won't change anything, we think it's going to work out, the time isn't ripe yet to make changes. But it seems to be the right time to review it, to see if in fact that is what we want to do, given that we are starting to see more and more of these requests. The interesting thing is our city is not alone in this same situation. Many other cities are receiving similar requests for these large high-density projects. And we're not saying they're bad, we're not saying we're not going to do them. We could continue as we are, but this is the right time, I think, to step back and take a look and see exactly where we want to be on this project. And our staff are very good at pulling together information for us and getting what needs to be done to make some recommendations and comparisons so that we will know what direction to go as we evaluate the different options and the impact of each of those. So, with that then, seeing no further comments, we will turn to our city recorder for the roll call vote.
Councilman Fitisemanu?
Aye.
Councilman Bueller?
Aye.
Councilman Ham?
No.
Councilman Christensen?
Aye.
Councilman Norfelt?
Yes.
And Mayor Bigelow?
Aye.
Motion passes by majority.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have item 9 on our agenda, Resolution 19-116. This will authorize the city to condemn property for property at 2940 West, 3650 South. And this will facilitate the construction of an extension to the Promenade Park there in Fairborn Station. This will be part of a long-term vision of creating a city center. We have worked and typically do work with individuals to use the free market to come to an agreement. And that has not worked and has been kind of difficult situation. As a city, we have been very reluctant in the past to use this type of situation. I think this is in the last, 10, 12 years, about the third, fourth time.
Very rarely, I think it's actually less than 4, and 1 or 2 of those, if I remember, were actually condemnations of leases, weren't even of the property
That's
itself.
right. That's correct. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That's good. So that is what is before us on this proposal to the council. Oh, let's see. There should be here, I forgot, we really do need to make an opportunity for anyone representing the property owner to come and speak to this. And if you would state your name and address and your relationship with the property owner, if you're officially, representing him legally, you're representing him, it's your brother-in-law, or, whatever.
My name is Justin Matkin. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Parr, Brown, Guillen, Lovelace. My address is 101 South, 200 East, Suite 700 in Salt Lake City. And I am legal counsel for the Audi Leventhal Irrevocable Family Trust.
Okay.
My main practice is eminent domain. I kind of specialize in eminent domain. And I've had a number of cases over the years with your outside counsel, Rob Hughes, and especially when he used to work at UTA. And so, anyhow, I'm happy to address, I apologize, first of all, Mr. Leventhal wanted to be here this evening, but he's ill and was not able to do so. So I'm representing him, and one other gentleman here, Mr. Scott Reynolds, is a real estate agent. I'd like to give him a few minutes as well, if that's okay, for him to discuss what he's doing with respect to this property. It sounds like you all have a kind of somewhat of a history of the property already, but with the risk of belaboring this, I want to just take a minute or two and kind of go over some of the historical uses and the proposed uses that Mr. Leventhal would like to put to this property. He purchased it a couple of decades ago when it was dental offices. It was a couple of dental buildings, and I think in 2014 entered into an agreement with the city at the city's request to demolish those buildings. And so there was a cooperation between the redevelopment agency of the city and Mr. Leventhal to clear the property of those buildings in anticipation of development that he proposed to do. And he spent several years attempting to develop what he wanted to do, which was a memory care facility. He and his wife were both doctors, ex-wife were both doctors, and involved in memory care. And it was kind of their passion. They wanted to develop a memory care facility on the property, but he could never quite come to an agreement with the city. And I don't understand all the disagreements about what that was. And other than there was a disagreement about how many stories the building was going to be and other types of things. And so it never came to fruition. For the last couple of years, nothing's really happened, which probably is why the city is kind of taking the action that it has. I just drove by it for the first time today and saw it, and you can see it's kind of a prime piece of property in a very important part of the city, next to the library, just down the street from City Hall and across from other developments going on. And so I can see why the city would want to have something happen with this property. I just want to make sure that the City Council understands what it's doing. One is the property is currently for sale. It's being marketed for sale. And in accordance with what the zoning would allow, which is a high-density residential apartment structure. And those are pretty hot projects, as you all know, from what you were just talking about. And so it's currently being marketed for that, and Mr. Reynolds will talk a little bit about the specifics. But the problem is he can't move forward with those because there's kind of a blight that's been put on it by the city's efforts to condemn it. When you have a letter from the city saying we want to condemn your property, you can't really sell it, because if somebody comes to you and says we want to buy your property, we say, well, we have to tell you the city says they're going to condemn it. So it kind of puts you in a catch-22 situation. But I just want to make sure that the city council understands exactly what it's getting itself into, because often councils don't condemn because they want to. It's not usually a choice. They usually condemn because they have to. And the reason is because the city's gotten an appraisal, and the city's appraisal appraised the property at $1.865 million. That's an expensive park. But if we go to litigation in this, the city actually does file an eminent domain action. That appraisal, it will be evidence, but it's not the only evidence. We'll have our own appraiser, and he'll testify about the value of the property. And my estimation is that it'll be many times $1.8 million. So, for instance, I took a case to trial with UDOT on the Mountain View corridor about 3 years ago. UDOT said the property was worth $5 million. We said it was worth 21, and we got a judgment for 15. There was an instance that's very similar to this actually that I represent a landowner in Salt Lake City, where there's a little piece of property across from the Gallivan Center on 2nd South. It was an old Kenji's restaurant, and then it was a Beto's restaurant, and then it kind of went into disrepair, and it was kind of a blight. And the city really wanted something to happen with this property, and so it sent us a letter that says, we're going to condemn it for a pocket park. I'd never heard of a pocket park. It was a pocket park. Well, this is going to be a little park. And so they appraised it for like $400,000. It was like a quarter acre in the middle of downtown Salt Lake City. We said, there's no way that property is worth that amount of money. So we started marketing the property, and we got an offer for about 3 times that amount. And the city said, okay, we'll sell it. That's great. Develop it. And they didn't really want a pocket park. They just wanted something to happen with the property. They wanted it to be developed. They wanted it to stop being an eyesore. And so, and the city really didn't want to spend over $1 million for the park. They just wanted it done. Sure, we'll buy it for $400,000. Yeah, that's not that much money. But they didn't really want to pay 1.2, which was what the property was really worth, even though their appraiser said it was for 400. So, and I see this kind of as a similar situation that okay, there's an idea that you're going to put a 3-acre park right in the middle of the city center. It's a great idea, but this is a budget-busting decision. 1.8, I mean, even if everything goes perfectly for the city in this litigation, you're going to end up paying $2 million for a piece of property, for a 3-acre piece of property, when you don't really need to. That's the point, which is the property, in our estimation, is worth between $6 and $8 million. So if the property was, if you had to buy it for $6 million, if you had to buy it for $8 million, would you do it? Because that's the risk you're taking, which is, do you really want a park down the street for $8 million? Because that's the risk. And if you get to that point and you decide, well, we don't really want it, then state law says you have to pay our attorney's fees and you have to pay all our costs if you abandon an eminent domain lawsuit. So the only person who wins in that situation will be me, honestly, because I'll get my attorney's fees paid from an abandoned lawsuit because the city decided at the end of the day they didn't actually want to go forward with it. So the other thing is if the city ever decides it wants to resell the property or do something with it to somebody else, state statute says that you can't resell the property unless you give a right of first offer to, or right of first refusal to the owner. So if you keep it for a park for a couple of years and then you decide at some point, well, maybe we'll sell it to somebody else, or maybe we'll do something. State statute still requires that you give them an opportunity, give Mr. Leventhal and his trust an opportunity to buy it back. And so I'm not sure you're really accomplishing what you really want to accomplish. If I can understand that the property is maybe an eyesore, maybe you want something done with it, that's going to happen. Mr. Leventhal, I understand, kind of has a little bit of history with the city, and I appreciate that. But he's getting older. He doesn't have the same gusto that he used to have. He's put the property on the market. He wants to sell it. He wants to develop it. It'll be done in accordance with the zoning that's existing, what's permitted, which is city center, CC zone. And all the problems will be solved. And you won't put the city in a situation where you're taking property against somebody's will. The property's for sale. And so if the city wanted to buy it at market rates, let's do it. But I don't think the city really wants to buy it at market rates. It wants to buy it at their appraisal value that it established. And so anyhow, I guess my conclusion is that I would ask City Council to just let this owner who's owned this property for a number of decades, who's held it, who's cooperated with the city to demolish the buildings, clear essentially the path for this whole thing, attempted to develop what he thought was a good project, a memory care facility, not being successful. Now, after a couple of years, it's back on the market, it's being marketed. Allow that process to take hold. Allow the owner to be able to reap the benefits of what of his ownership. I represent a lot of people in his situation, And it's, you know, it's a distressing thing to have your property taken, and you get sued. I mean, the city's gonna sue Mr. the Leventhal Trust, and the only reason why you would sue him is because he happens to own property in West Valley City. That the city thinks that it has a better idea that for the use of his property than what he's planning on using it for. And so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, Mr. Reynolds would like a few minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Reynolds, same thing, your name, what your relationship is, and an address.
Scott Reynolds, 10291 North Cottonwood Drive, Cedar Hills, Utah. I represent Audie Leventhal in the marketing of his property. We've had it on the market for about 2 months now, and we've had several developers reach out to us, and we've reached out to several developers that would love the opportunity to develop on that piece of land. Obviously, it's a prime piece of real estate. They would love to do a multifamily, high-density development there that fits within the city center zone permissions or zoning. They would love to work with the city. Like was said, the reaction that we've got from any developer that we've met with or talked with is, let us know what the city ends up doing, because nobody wants to put in the time, the effort, or the money to move forward or do any planning, knowing that a condemnation could be imminent on the property. And so we would love to work with the city, have time to work with developers, and have them work with the city on creating a great project there, a beautiful project that would fit within the city center zone, that would match the other great projects that are going around. We've created a marketing package for the property that I've brought that I'd love to share with you that you can look through. We engaged a architect to do a preliminary kind of mock-up of what could be built on the property according to the zoning, and they came up with a property that had 324 units on it, a structured parking, 5-story unit or 5-story building that meets the city zoning. Based on that 324 units, like was mentioned, we believe that the property would go anywhere between $6 and $8 million based on current rates. What land is going for that amount of units, and maybe even more. I was just told today of another piece of land that was sold up on 21st South next to a tracks line like here that went for $33,000 a unit, which if applied to this property would put it actually closer or a little bit above the $10 million range. And so there is great value obviously in the land. There are developers out there that want to develop a great project. We'd love to work with the city, but have held back because they just want to find out, what the city plans are. And obviously they feel like there's a conflict there with the city, trying to find out, what help they can get with the city, or how the city can work with them when the city, is trying to get the land themselves. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, to the council.
A couple of comments, Mayor. I think that it's good to have you here, and the information that you presented, you kind of made our arguments for us. It is a vacant parcel in which nothing is happening, and the city doesn't enter into these kinds of actions lightly, never does. I'm in my 10th year on the council, and I can remember one other time where we had to start these proceedings. The owner of the property had passed away and no probate had been started, and we just didn't have someone to deal with until we proceeded. The other issue, or the other time, was the lease at Toys R Us. This property sits in our city center. It's vacant. And if I remember right, and I'm pretty sure I do, we've been trying to negotiate with the owner of this property since before I was on the council 10 years ago. And that all of a sudden, there's all these ideas and things that we can do. Well, that's great. Our resolution is that we will proceed with negotiation or condemnation, not just condemnation. This is an important piece in our city, and we need to allow our staff to pursue it as may best be accomplished and open up all options to make that happen. I'll make a motion. Move for approval of Resolution 19-116.
Second. Property before us. Perhaps I'll add a comment here before we finalize the vote. It is interesting where we just talked about a project that was going to perhaps be built. The council can't, it is difficult to deal with suppositions or proposals or maybes. We have to deal with what is in front of us, what is actually there. And there's a long history where we currently are, and that's what we have to deal with. Many people can come in and make all sorts of statements about what might be or what could be or maybe this will happen, but I can't deal with that. I can only deal with where we are right now with this property, its history, and what's happened up to this point. And so that's what I will reflect in my voting. Well, maybe I'll stop there. I'm not an attorney and I might say things that aren't fitting along that line.
Mayor, as I have witnessed this property over my 8 years on the council, as I remember, the property was cleared at the city's request because it had been, the dental office had been vacated for many years and was becoming a derelict building. And I think, as I remember back there, I'm not positive, but I think the city actually helped pay that rest of the cost for the demolition. And then it has sat because they never wanted to meet the requirements of the city center coding and the city center zoning. The memory care facility was great, but they didn't want to make it function with the rest of the city center zone. And so they just decided to just let it sit, and it has been sitting since then. I don't see what the difference is that suddenly now it's become so much more valuable than it was 10 years ago.
Based upon the discussion that's been had, and I think I would comment on that, I know there were a number of comments made about the city wanting it for a park. And I guess in many respects, the value of that for the city is not determined by its dollar value, but by what it does for the city, and not just for the next year, but rather what it does for the city as an entity over a period of decades. Green space is critical to cities for their health and well-being. I wish we had enough money that we could go buy a lot more of those places. But it doesn't make sense to do it in any location, there are places where it does make sense, where it can make a significant impact based upon its location, which here in our city center that would do. So actually the discussion made me more committed that we are taking the right course after hearing the comments that have been made. So just interesting the way that works out. Any other comments? If not, we'll turn to our city recorder for the vote.
Councilman Norfelt,
Yes.
Councilman Christensen,
Yes.
Councilman Humes,
Aye.
Councilman Bueller,
Aye.
Councilman Fitisemanu,
Aye.
and Mayor Bigelow.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Next, we have Resolution 19-122, authorize the city to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Utah Attorney General's office. And this is to participate in what is called statewide enforcement of crimes by undocumented residents, SECURE task force. And this formalizes an understanding with us and the Attorney General's office. Before anyone gets really excited and thinking that this has anything to do with ICE or anything like that, it does have to do with specifically human trafficking, the production, distribution of fraudulent government documents, and other major felony crimes. And what happens here, this will be funded by the Office of the Attorney General, and a West Valley City Police Department officer will be on that task force approximately 2 to 4 days a month. And we are currently investigating those things. What this does is combine resources so that we work together, because typically those who are involved in this don't pay much attention to city boundaries. They operate wherever they can, and it's very effective to combine resources and work together in dealing with these issues. That is the issue before us. Any other comments from the council or any motions?
I move for approval of the resolution 19-122.
Second.
Properly before us, any further comments?
Just a question.
Yes.
Are these activities and actions that our police force is currently involved in already? And this will just help us by actually helping to pay these officers for the work that they're doing? Or is this something totally new, a new assignment type thing?
Thank you, sir. So it is a new agreement, but the purpose of it is allow us to get recompense for some of those costs that are associated with it. And it's my understanding, I believe we are actually already participating where possible, where we've got the time and ability to do that.
I have that feeling. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, to our city recorder.
Councilman Fitisemanu,
Aye.
Councilwoman Lang, Councilman Bueller,
Thank you. Aye.
Councilman Hughes,
Aye.
Councilman Christensen,
Aye.
Councilman Norfelt,
Yes.
and Mayor Bigelow.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Next, we have Resolution 19-123. This is to execute an amendment to an interlocal cooperation agreement between our city and Salt Lake County for funding of some transportation projects. This is for what is called County Active Transportation Network Improvement Plan, affectionately known as CATNIP funds. Government likes its acronyms, that's for sure. So we applied for and received an award of $27,500. We made a match of $2,500 so that we can use those funds to improve striping and signing for existing bike lane facilities in the city. That is the purpose of this. The council.
I move for approval of Resolution 19-123.
Second.
Properly before us, any further comments? Seeing none,
Councilman Nordfeld,
Yes.
Councilman Christensen,
Yes.
Councilman Hune,
Aye.
Councilman Bueller,
Aye.
Councilman Fitisemanu, and Mayor Bigelow.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
And now we have Resolution 19-124. This is to approve the purchase of brining equipment from Semi-Service Incorporated. This would be for $70,000 total. The actual cost is slightly less. We rounded up in case there are some minor adjustments to that. We went to Semi-Service Company. This is for a truck and a fill station to take, and this equipment will put what we call this brine solution down on the pavement. It's done before a storm comes, and it prevents it from freezing or reduces that possibility. It has worked well. I know the state of Utah uses it. UDOT has used that. This is very effective, and sometimes I think, I know I've seen it when they go through, and I see the little squiggly lines where they put it down on the pavement or on the asphalt. And I'm glad to see that they've done it, because then I know that my street, if it's on my street, won't end up being just a pack of ice. It really helps, really helps. Doesn't prevent it all, but it really helps. That is the issue before us for the Henderson Brine Extreme Pro Advantage and Truck Fill Station.
Mayor, I move for approval of Resolution 19-124.
Second.
Property before us, any further comments? Seeing none, to our report.
Councilman Nordfeld,
Yes.
Councilman Christensen,
Yes.
Councilman Hune,
Aye.
Councilman Bueller,
Aye.
Councilman Fitisemanu, and Mayor Bigelow.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that concludes our regular agenda for the evening. Any final comments, schedule-wise, concern, anything? Okay. Then,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Passes unanimously, we're adjourned.